What's going on, Professor Takahashi and MND 305? And for my movie vlog, I watched Spotlight. I can full and confirm this is my first time watching it. It is 2 hours and 8 minutes. Have not watched it for any other class or whatever. And yeah, the plot of the story is kind of an editor, Marty Baron of the Boston Globe, assigned really four journalists to investigate allegations against John Gagan, who's an unfrocked priest, really accused of molesting more than 80 boys in Boston. And reporters interview victims and really try to unseal sensitive documents. And by the way, this is episode 3 of my podcast, Literacy Talk, so I really hope you guys enjoy. The first lesson I took away from Spotlight is that collaboration and investigative journalism is essential. Well, I've been used to doing kind of individual projects and articles for the Daily Orange and MND 305. Long form pieces kind of like this, the one that the reporters were working on, really requires collaboration. And this investigation did not happen overnight. It took months. So Marty Barron, the head editor, sent reporters on a mission. They had to kind of work together to obtain important information. And throughout the movie, different reporters really spoke to different victims to really get their stories in depth. For example, one reporter, I believe it was Michael Resendez, he tried to access court documents to discover what the church knew about the abuses, while another reporter in Sasha Pfeiffer spoke one-on-one with the particular victim and like had lunch or dinner with him to kind of delve deeper into experiences. And then I think around like the 1 hour and 3 minute mark of the movie or so, a group of reporters comes together to go through documents and really research priests. And that was a group effort that really wasn't one person. I think if it was one person, that would be a lot harder to do and it'd be very time consuming. So overall, I just think kind of like working together as a team, assigning different roles, stuff I've done in class projects, but not really in journalism yet. I think it's very essential. All right, my second lesson is that it's really important to always ask specific and follow-up questions when interviewing a source, even ones that could be a little sensitive at times. Ever since I really started becoming passionate about journalism in high school and had my first interviews, I always came prepared with a set of 10 questions to ask. The only issue is that I only asked these questions and didn't really resort to follow-ups, which led to pretty bland angles and stories. In Spotlight, however, reporters ask follow-up questions and really get to the crux of the victim's stories. Around the 37-minute mark of the movie, a reporter goes on the fly and asks follow-up questions to a victim about the time he was abused as a 12-year-old. The source was visibly upset and almost crying, but it's still really important to kind of step out of your comfort zone and ask those hard-hitting questions. And a topic that came up was how his dad killed himself ultimately, and that is really, really sensitive. It's a really dark topic, but I still think really asking those questions and making sure your sources are okay is really important for producing strong journalism. And then there were numerous times just throughout the movie where a victim gave a reporter broad information, and the reporter asked, "Where was this? How are you feeling?" to kind of get like sensory details and things like that. And that's something throughout this class I've really grown to do. When for my Parthenon Books profile, like the source initially didn't really come out of her shell a lot. The information was quite vague, but then I asked really specifics like what stores closed, for example, and I think that was on full display in this movie too. All right, the third lesson I took away from Spotlight is that it's really, really important to be persistent even when sources deny you. I've learned it firsthand with the Daily Orange, but sources are going to deny you and say they can't give you information that maybe because it's confidential, maybe a source just doesn't want to talk. It's just a reality of today and age. That was exactly the case in Spotlight, but as the reporters did, it's critical to stay persistent without pushing boundaries. A reporter within the story, I forget exactly who, asked to obtain church documents and is denied because the copy room was closed. Another reporter was trying to have a notebook out in order to take like comprehensive notes during an interview, but the source said, quote unquote, I probably shouldn't even be speaking to you. The reporter lashed back and obviously said a story needs to be told. If we cover this story, everyone will hear about it. And I think I think that was good on the reporter, like really diving deep into like what the importance of really taking notes is because storytelling is vital. If it takes being a bit more aggressive than you want at times, I think it's fine, as long as you don't cross the line, of course. So a lesson kind of from the start of the movie that I kind of took away is that it's really important to kind of add to coverage already out there and go beyond what other newspapers have covered. So early in the movie, Barron really discusses like with reporters like whether there were already articles out there on whether cardinal law knew about the priest abuses. And after the reporters there say they weren't any articles on whether cardinal law knew about the abuses, Barron sends them out to investigate that through a long form project. And that's something that it's not something that'll be in the paper every day, but it does take months of hard work. And in MND 305, I'll be sure to research what's on my beat and add, not copy to existing coverage out there. So apart from the middle of the story that really stuck out to me and kind of a lesson I could take away from it is that keeping your composure when reporting is super, super important. When Sasha Pfeiffer is interviewing a source named Joe about how someone molested him, he begins to break down into tears. Joe said during the interview that he was going to begin to cry, and then he just totally bursted out in tears midway through the interview. Rather than really continuing to ask questions and panicking about what to do in the moment, Pfeiffer gives Joe a minute to really collect himself and comforts him. She does put her hand on him, which I thought was a little bit awkward and a little bit odd, but it does allow her to kind of keep her composure in the moment. And then additionally, Pfeiffer kind of still takes notes on what's kind of going on, the ongoing situation, but still looks Joe in the eye and clearly gives him the attention he needs without panicking. And then whenever I'm reporting on a sensitive topic in the future, I'll be sure to stay composed and take breaks when needed because if you're just going out into the field and doing really sensitive reporting for 3 hours straight, it's going to really burn you and you're going to see it in the product. It's not really a like a takeaway or lesson, more just an observation. But I found interesting at the end of the piece, Marty Barron, the head editor, really commends the reporters for the job they did, and in kind of that he really specifies the reason why they did so well. And the main reason for the compliment is that because the piece is going to have like an immediate impact on the reader who see it. And it's really timely. We always talk about timeliness being important. And then essentially the piece kind of takes everything we've talked about in class to a greater extent being newsworthy, going beyond what's already asked, be going beyond what's out there already, and just asking the hard questions in interviews, and even if they're a little sensitive. And I think all that together makes for a really good story, which is why Marty Barron really commended his reporters. All right, so the two main reasons I think student journalists should really tune into this, I think number one, because establishing really strong relationships with sources is vital now and age. You really never know when you're going to have to go back to a source for a second or even third interview. That's something I kind of learned in the prerequisites, but something on full display here, like Sasha Pfeiffer when she was interviewing Joe, like some of the conversations they were having, yes, they were sensitive, but I could really tell they were developing really a strong relationship. And then the next reason is like kind of all comes back to the follow-up questions. It's really like really dig deep to find like the meat of the story, the crux of the story, like what's not out there already. Like the more you kind of ask and the more specific you get as reporters did in this story, the more polished and the more specific your angle is going to be. And we have entered Broad's gradebook, and I'm going to give this movie a solid 8.73 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed the spine of it overall, the really investigative reporting that's going to come in really handy for the final project. It got a little boring towards the end, and some sections were like, it was a little hard to determine kind of like who was speaking, who was a character, but overall, I really thought the story was told visually very strong, and I would highly recommend it.